Right, friends, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, I want to welcome you to our April update here within the Chrysalis community. Again, a thanks to all of you who have been joining these monthly calls. I told Matthew, even with us being a week later because of Holy Week, I feel like we just met. It has been a fast month. And so again, want to welcome you tonight. We have a couple folks in the room that I want to just give a quick introduction to, and then a few that we will give a longer introduction to as we go. So if you do not know, I am Chelsea Spires. I'm one of the co-leaders of the Chrysalis Advisory Team. My main role has been around rewriting materials and doing updates to manuals, and then of course leading these monthly trainings. And so again, we have, and then I'm joined by Matthew Smith, who is my other half in this process. So Matthew also helps lead the Chrysalis Advisory Team. His main role is around leading the advisory team and also in responding to lots of your questions and one of your main points of contact as communities. We are joined tonight by Doc Hall, Doc, what is your official title?
I am the Associate Director of Emmaus Ministries at the Upper Room.
There we go. I know that it's often changing. It's often, Doc's role is often evolving. And yeah, we are so grateful for his support. We are grateful that he's here tonight and that he is just Matthew and I's point of contact in the Emmaus office. So many of you know him, many of you love him. We're just glad that he's here tonight. And then the final introduction is to Reverend Mike Ratliff, who Mike leads the Discovery Weekend. And I'm going to give a little bit more of an intro to Mike as we launch into talking about Discovery Weekend tonight, but wanted you to at least see his face there highlighted on your screen. So Mike, we're also grateful for your time. I just want to remind folks as we're getting started that tonight's meeting is being recorded and the audio and video recordings will be made available after this call. We'll put a link there in the chat in just a moment to our YouTube page where previous trainings can also be found. So it's a great way to share information with folks who are not able to be here tonight. Then I think just two updates to give y'all. So the first is that manuals continue to be on schedule as far as being available to you for purchase. The worship booklet is being printed as we speak. Other manuals are also on their way to the printers and on their way to final edits as far as e-publishing. And so I just give thanks for our publishing team and for the miracle. I don't know, a year and a half ago when Matthew and I and Doc and so many others were laying out the schedule for this relaunch. There was a lot of questions of if we would make this May deadline, and yet we are making it. It is here. So those materials will be made available for you in the beginning of May. You will get an email as soon as they go live, and then you can purchase away. And then the final reminder is that on May 15th, from 12 to 3 p.m. Central, we are excited for this Chrysalis relaunch extravaganza. We were hopeful that this time could be in person, but again, due to COVID-19, that in-person gathering has been delayed to the fall. But we hope that you'll join us for a longer time to really celebrate these materials. I know that these Thursday night sessions have been a lot of information. The time on May will really be one of worship and of celebration. There will be some time in breakout rooms where you'll get to go deeper into a topic you are interested in. So maybe if you missed one of the trainings, or if you are if you are a spiritual leader in your community, we will have a specific spot for spiritual leaders to talk and brainstorm and talk about these changes. So we hope that you will join us on May 15th, and there will be a link to register for that meeting following this one. You'll get that follow-up email a little bit sooner than you have from Matthew and I these last couple of months. And so thank you for your patience as we've gotten the recordings together and your question and answers. So that's what I have as far as announcements. I'm going to pass it to Matthew, who has our opening devotion.
Thanks, Chelsea. Just one last reminder as we transition to a devotion, your community, your covenant letters, those are due this month. And so be sure that those covenant letters are in the works. And if you have any questions about those, just reach out, and I'm happy to help you with those. As we move into a time of devotion, I was led today to focus on, we're talking a lot about new beginnings with new Chrysalis materials being released, but I felt led to focus on endings, the end of things. So I'll read, very familiar to everyone, just a bit from Ecclesiastes 3. For everything there's a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to seek and a time to lose. We know that when something new happens, we feel fresh excitement, right? When a new baby's born, when a marriage begins, a new friendship starts, move into a new house, earn a degree, move into a new career. We invest a lot of dreaming, planning, a lot of money, a lot of energy into all of these new beginnings. But we might not always think about or even reflect on a plan for endings. Maybe because endings are often goodbyes, right? They're a chapter closing. They often leave us with grief of some kind. And so as we move toward the end of an amazing season of Chrysalis, we have been mostly anticipating and reflecting on the new that is to come. That's what all these sessions have been about. But I'd like for us to reflect for a moment on the ending of this season. When we're at the end of something, I think that it gives us a chance to reflect on the true fruit of what went before. All the dreaming, the planning, the labor, the investment. If we think, I'm in the middle of Ohio, right? And so I live in a little town of 1,700 people, and there's not another town within 10 miles of me. And so it's a lot of fields that are very clear right now. And so I think about these farmers, a lot of them plant beans and corn around here. And so the farmer prepares the field, the farmer plants the corn, and the corn grows, but it is not until the very end of the corn's life cycle that we see what the season and we see what the farming diligence produced. So I'm sure that we can think back to moments over the last several years in our individual Chrysalis communities, our individual Walk to Emmaus communities, and see fruits of our labors and investments. I'm sure that many of you have probably kept such good records that you can even bring that down to a number of every participant that has been through weekends in your communities. But endings can also be more truthful than beginnings. Many of us can reflect back on the last several years, and among those positive fruits of our labor, we also see canceled weekends, right? We see low attendance. We see poor sponsorship. We've had trouble securing board members. We've had trouble securing enough funds to even move forward with a weekend. And so as we move forward, I want to reflect back on Ecclesiastes, just the last verse that I read. For every time to seek, there is a time to lose. Learning to end well, learning to let go well, it's a part of Christian discipleship. And so how do we prepare for this time to lose as we reflect on this ending, as we approach a new beginning? And how do we help others do the same? Well, obviously we pray. We pray intentionally. God can make our transition out of a season uniquely powerful in glorifying God. Uniquely powerful in glorifying God. And so just looking at one great mentor from the Bible for this time to lose, John the Baptist. From the 3rd chapter of John, they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, look, the man who was with you across the Jordan, the one about whom you testified, is baptizing, and everyone is flocking to him. John replied, no one can receive anything unless it is given from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said that I'm not the Christ, but that I'm the one sent before him. The groom is the one who is getting married. The friend of the groom stands close by, and when he hears him, is overjoyed at the groom's voice. Therefore, my joy is now complete. He must increase, and I must decrease. Hear that last verse again. He must increase, and I must decrease. In the beginning of John's ministry, his ministry was all about Jesus. But the end of his ministry was even more about Jesus. And that's what every end of every season is hopefully about for us. The increase of Jesus in our decrease. And so I would encourage you as we come to the end of these current Chrysalis materials, ask God to prepare us and ask God to prepare those around you in ministry so that as this season ends and we launch into the next, we say, Jesus must increase, I must decrease. And as we mourn aspects of the current materials that we're leaving behind, we continue to say, Jesus must increase, I must decrease. And as we encounter those who are struggling with the end of this season, even being a part of the advisory team and being there every step of the way, as we've discerned and prayed about all of these different changes, as we encounter those who are struggling, continue to pray that Jesus must increase and I must decrease. Friends, would you pray with me? Father God, we thank you for Chrysalis. We thank you for all that Chrysalis has been over the past several decades. God, we thank you for each person who has been a part of Chrysalis, for each person who has studied these current materials and has used them and has been a participant on those weekends, where we have hopefully decreased ourselves to let you shine through. So God, as we continue from these sessions back into our home communities, and we use these new materials, and we adopt these new materials, and we share with others about these new materials, that we would continue to pray to you to help us decrease so that Jesus will continue to increase as we move into a new season. God, we ask this in the precious name of your Son. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Matthew. Friends, tonight we have the pleasure of hearing from Mike Ratliff, who is doing many, many things. And one of the things that Mike is doing is leading the Discovery Weekend program, leading the Discovery Advisory Team. Many of you have been a part of Chrysalis and Emmaus conversations about a 2-day model for Chrysalis. And I know some of you who, if you were waiting on the manual updates that were originally supposed to come out 3 or 4 years ago, you heard a lot about this 2-day option. Well, as our advisory team began to meet, and as we began to discern what that 2-day option for Chrysalis might look like, with the Emmaus office, in consultation with them and with Jeffrey Parker, who had been previously doing this work, we discerned that the 2-day option that is really most faithful for Chrysalis is actually Discovery Weekend. There are so many similarities between these two programs, a similar vision, a similar themes, similar impact, that it didn't make sense for us to try and rewrite Chrysalis into 2 days when there was already another faithful 2-day option. And so we are hopeful that for many of your communities, the changes that we have made to Chrysalis in the 3-day option will still work for you. But if you and your community are discerning between the 2- and 3-day model, we wanted you to hear tonight from Mike Ratliff. We wanted you to hear some of the foundations of Discovery. I know some of you are really familiar with the program, but others of you have just heard it by name. And so I'm grateful for Mike. I'm grateful that our journey started 6 years ago as I was serving as a young adult missionary, and Mike was present at our commissioning service. And 6 years ago, Mike sat down at a chair with my face on a prayer card, and he has been praying for me and I for him ever since. Our relationship, our paths have crossed in many ways over these last 6 years. And yet I would have never dreamed that 6 years later, Mike would be leading Discovery and I would be helping to lead Chrysalis. And yet here we are. And so again, I'm grateful for Mike. He is a dear friend and mentor in my life. And so without further ado, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chelsea. It's, am I unmuted? Yes. I thought so. And then I had something just pop up here that I don't know what that is. Anyway, my name is Mike Ratliff, as you heard earlier. Up until a year and a half ago, I was the executive with Young People's Ministries at Discipleship Ministries. Prior to that, I spent 30 years in youth ministry. I know I don't look it. I got married when I was 5. That's how I can have a son in his 30s. But I spent 30 years in local church youth ministry. I saw someone from Northwest Georgia. You might be familiar with Roswell United Methodist Church in Atlanta while I was served there. We had numerous young people in our program who went through Chrysalis. And Chrysalis was an integral part of growing young spiritual leaders in that congregation. And so I was involved in that in various ways. I've served as a spiritual director. I've spoken as for one of the talks. I've done various things related to that. I've written a whole bunch of letters, and so in my journeys, I came back to Nashville, where I went to graduate school, and worked with discipleship ministries, and in that process had the opportunity to go to a smaller, about 300 members congregation in Nashville. And that congregation did Discovery Weekend. It was the first time I had ever heard of Discovery, and they needed somebody to sleep on the floor overnight with the middle schoolers. And as a veteran youth minister, you can imagine that I've had lots of experience sleeping on floors and spending nights with middle schoolers and helping them to sleep a little bit. And so I volunteered, and then I worked as a small group leader and various other kinds of things as a part of the Discovery event. Had the opportunity to meet the person who started that. Her name is Reverend Melody Traylor. She's from the North Alabama Annual Conference. Was hired in a church to work with youth in a situation where the youth pastor, who had been there many years and was very beloved, was in the process of a terminal disease. And so they were looking for a way to help those young people experience a sense of belonging with each other and with the whole congregation in order to help them through that. Melody had been very involved in Chrysalis and Emmaus in the North Alabama Annual Conference. And so she created Discovery Weekend. And so the elements that you would be familiar with is that there are talks, there are small discipleship groups called D groups that meet throughout the weekend. There are special things that happen along the way. There's a prayer service that happens on Saturday night where parents and other people who love and care about the young people who are there come together, and each young person is prayed for individually with others laying their hands on. It is a tremendous experience, and Melody had felt the need to transition Discovery Weekend to the Upper Room, and really felt like it fit with Emmaus Ministries. And so working with the staff of Emmaus Ministries, the program was transitioned there in 2017. And the three manuals, there's a manual for each year, Discovering God's Love Through the Church, through Scripture, and through everyday life. And those are designed to rotate every 3 years. So a middle schooler would go through Discovery each year and have a different content experience. There are it's really hard to tie this down, as you can imagine, but there are about 150 churches, mostly in the Southeast. There's a couple of congregations in greater New York that do Discovery together, smaller congregations. There's a congregation in Baltimore, there's one in Pennsylvania, but it has mostly been localized in the Southeast, and that's because that's where Melody has had most of her influence. So last year, I came on board with discipleship, or with the Upper Room, actually, in a consultant role, to work with the future of Discovery. And as the months evolved last year, what we really understood is that Discovery needed to be independent. Discovery needed to have the ability to move in some new directions, and through a discernment process with the leadership of the Upper Room and Emmaus, it was determined that we would do something I had decided I never wanted to do, and that's start a 501c3. And so we did that last fall in partnership with the Upper Room, and continue in partnership with the Upper Room for that process and have created Into Discovery. And so I encourage you, if you haven't had the opportunity to do this, to look at the Discovery Weekend Facebook page. You'll find a lot of information there, including invites to 2 upcoming events that are a more in-depth intro to Discovery Weekend that will feature some youth leaders from local churches where that's happening. And then we also have a website, Into Discovery, where you can read more about the background of its development. You can see information about the materials themselves, and you can purchase them there as well. So that's a quick, this is kind of how you would feel that you'd feel at home with Discovery. How is it different? It's very different in terms of the fact that it is focused on the local church. If you've done any reading about the research work that Fuller University or Fuller Seminary has been doing over the past probably 6 or 8 years, their sticky faith work and their growing young research, what all of that research really says is that for the church to make a difference in the lives of young people beyond the time that they are in the church, strong relationships need to be built between all age groups in the congregation. One of the amazing pieces for me at my church when the first time I participated in Discovery was that we had about a dozen middle schoolers who participated in Discovery Weekend. We had more than that in terms of high schoolers. The high schoolers give the talks. The high schoolers, in partnership with adult leaders, lead the D groups, the discipleship groups. The high schoolers serve in various ways throughout the weekend. There were adult leaders who provided various kinds of leadership in the preparation for the weekend and also during the weekend. There were adult Sunday school classes who provided meals and other kinds of support for the young people. The high schoolers stayed in homes of other members of the congregation rather than sleeping at the church with the middle schoolers. And so there were 70 to 80 people in this 300-member church who were focused on the spiritual development of middle schoolers. I want you to think about that. The majority of the active members of a congregation focused on the spiritual growth of middle schoolers. It's a pretty amazing experience in reality. And what I had the opportunity to see during our time in that congregation was the relationships that were built between young people and adults continued. It continued during their high school years. It has continued beyond. Just a couple of weeks ago, one of our youth had gotten married and had a baby. And on Facebook, he had pictures, and the predominant comments there were adults from that congregation because they had surrounded him from the time he was a middle schooler, actually earlier than that even. And so Discovery is very specifically designed to be an immersive experience in the local congregation. That is probably the biggest difference. There are certainly specific differences. The schedule generally is Friday night, all day Saturday through Saturday evening. The youth participate in services on Sunday morning that are designed for their participation, and there's a talk that's a part of that service as well. And then there's a closing service that's an opportunity for them to share and to make commitments beyond the weekend. So that's That's what happens with Discovery. In relation to high school, there are a couple of congregations that do a high school Discovery version of the Discovery Weekend. Some of them adapt the current materials. Some of them write their own content materials. And some of them start on Friday night. Some of them start on Saturday morning and go through the Sunday morning service on Sunday. Some of them actually hold those weekends at retreat centers rather than at the local church. Many Discovery weekends are held in larger congregations with smaller congregations joining them for the event, so that a smaller church who might not feel like they could provide the support and structure for a Discovery Weekend can be a part of and participate in a larger experience. So as we talked with Chrysalis leadership throughout the year, one of the things that we felt like was a next step for Discovery was to develop, and our advisory group was unanimous in the fact that we needed to develop a curriculum that was specifically content-wise directed toward high schoolers. So we're in the process right now of writing the first content manual for high school Discovery. And the theme for that is called Wide Open. And it uses the story of the prodigal son as the biblical basis for that experience. Our goal had been and may still be to have that material available fairly contiguously with the launch of the new Chrysalis materials. We are discovering that though we think as a small, nimble organization, we should be able to move faster, we aren't always able to move as quickly as we'd like. So that material is in the writing process right now. We will be adding to that material a 28-day devotional that begins during the weekend, and we'll have some materials for the small D groups during the weekend, but we'll then have resources for 28 days of devotionals beyond the weekend. We're working on that for each one of the manuals right now. The real goal is to tie what happens in that special event of that weekend to what's happening in the ongoing lives of the young people who participate. We will also be working on 4 weeks of guides for small group leaders, so that if you wanted the D groups to continue beyond the weekend, there would be material for the adult leaders to be able to do that as well. That gives you a quick overview, and I really want to just kind of stop there and see if there are questions. I know you've got a Q&A time later in the meeting, Chelsea. So do you want to wait until then, or take some time now?
I think we could go ahead and take some time now. Right before we go there, I just want to add to what Mike has said about Discovery. I was one of those youth leaders that adapted Discovery for high schoolers. I know that has been many of your questions as we've been prepping for this meeting. Is this really possible for high schoolers? And my answer to that would be yes, it is really possible. And really the model of leadership that Discovery has for high schoolers is some of what we have added into this Chrysalis update, right? So when we talk about that position of a peer leader and the equal ways that youth and adults serve on Chrysalis, some of that has come from watching successful Discovery weekends with youth really leading and youth really taking charge of those discipleship groups. And I just found as a youth leader, that small group time was possible for my high schoolers who weren't leading a discipleship group. So some would be leading discipleship groups, but then if they weren't leading a discipleship group, then they were in their own. So they were also going through the weekend. Of course, there were some questions that we adapted because the questions are mostly written for middle schoolers, but the material was really, really well received with both my high schoolers and my middle school students. And so just wanted to highlight that piece. So wonder if y'all have questions for Mike. Feel free to unmute or to put them in the chat. I think most of our questions in the chat so far have been about Chrysalis and some logistics of where to find things. But questions on content? Yeah, Donna, go ahead.
There. Okay. So the talks on the 2-day discovery for high schoolers would be similar to the Chrysalis talks, or what would be the difference in numbers of talks on a 2-day weekend? Explain that a little bit more.
There are 6 talks that are being designed into the weekend, that the initial high school weekend. I know from experience, I'm actually going down to Birmingham this weekend to our first discovery weekend of 2021, and it is being, I would encourage you to pray for the leadership of Bluff Park United Methodist Church. They originally had planned for people to be in individual tents outside and to do all of their sessions outside, and storms and possibly tornadoes are being predicted. So they've moved them into gyms, but they have adapted so that they will begin on Friday night and they'll end with their prayer service on Saturday night. And so they've adapted the number of talks that they'll be doing. One of the things about Discovery Weekend that I think you would find is fairly different than Chrysalis. I know Chrysalis is very proscribed in terms of you do this and you do this. As a matter of fact, I saw someone say something about minute by minute, and Discovery has that kind of schedule offered, but there's also significant room for adjustment in terms of local church needs and even schedule needs. So we will have the guides for 6 talks that will be a part of this initial high school discovery.
And to your question of content, Donna, there obviously, so there are less talks, right? But there are 3 different weekends of content. And so my experience in running those different weekends is that the topics of Chrysalis, the larger themes of Chrysalis, are all covered at some point in Discovery Weekend talks. It just happens at a different pace and in a different way, but many of those themes carry over.
Okay, so there would be the three-year rotation with this 2-day Discovery Weekend then?
Actually, what is beginning to happen with both the middle school and the high school is that there will be a weekend guide that provides the structure and the how-to of doing a discovery weekend. And then there will be content guides that will have different content themes, so that there eventually will probably be a number of different themes that you could choose from. and you could choose the theme that fits where your group is, which is easier to do when you're looking at a local church level kind of program than a Chrysalis program that is drawing from a number of different churches. But the goal is to be able to provide that. And one of the ways we're doing that, the high school theme is actually emerging from the high school discovery weekend of one of our discovery churches. So our goal is to work with churches that are developing their own content to be able to then add their content that has gone through an editing process, of course, so that it's consistent with all of the structure for all of the weekends. But the goal is to have various themes for each, and different people use these differently. Because of the themes for Discovery Weekend for middle schoolers, some churches use it as a part of their confirmation program. Church, scripture, everyday life, those are definitely themes of confirmation. And so there are churches that use those as a part of an ongoing confirmation program. And so the goal would be for us to provide more resources for varied kinds of experiences.
Okay, I'm actually just helping get our first Discovery Weekend this summer. You know, it's been canceled this will be the third time. So I'm a little, we've never gone through a weekend, so this is very helpful. And I was trying to figure out, because I've been more groomed in the Chrysalis, which I'm excited about the new things going on. So I was trying to figure out how all this was going to happen. So thanks.
Right. And I don't necessarily see Discovery as being a total replacement for Chrysalis.
Right.
You know, early in these conversations, there was talk at the upper room, and Doc, I know you were a part of this, where we talked about kind of this spirituality pipeline that that there is this need and opportunity for spirituality experiences and discipleship growth experiences that focus at different times for different ages. So my hope would be that many of the young people who go through a Discovery Weekend as middle schoolers will choose to do Chrysalis as a high schooler. I also know that even in a conversation I had earlier this week with the staff of a church that does Discovery Weekend, the challenges of high schoolers being able to miss school, to be where that's necessary, to be able to be a part of a Chrysalis Weekend is real. And so for them to be able to have that option of having a high school experience that that will be different than Chrysalis, but is still a high school experience that's focused for high schoolers, is really important. But I have loved what Chrysalis has brought to the spiritual lives of high schoolers I know who have been a part of it. And so I would hope that many of the young people who go through Discovery as middle schoolers would also be a part of the Chrysalis program that you guys are about to relaunch.
Well, and honestly, just to put a plug in for Chrysalis and the Emmaus ministry, I have gotten great responses of church members that continually say, always have an excuse not to go on an Emmaus weekend. Really excited about helping these youth. And then now we have our high schoolers. Only 3 have gone through Chrysalis, but there's everybody else that haven't, that's going to be, I'll say, a feeder program into Chrysalis some way or another. I have not seen the spark, because it's so local instead of spread out over our communities. It is so local that it has really been neat to these people that, I don't know, for some reason just never wanted to go on a weekend or didn't think they needed it have been really excited. So I think our community is going to be sparked by this Discovery Weekend, but now knowing there's even more options is even greater. So
I tell people I think Discovery Weekend is one of the best church revitalization programs that's available. It is amazing the spiritual experiences that parents have when they get to pray with their kids,
yes,
when they get to hear about their experiences. It really truly is an opportunity to revitalize local churches as well. And then maybe they'll go on Emmaus. It took me a long time to go.
Yeah. Well, and I have the Emmaus board that I attend frequently. A lot of other communities say, can I send our, we have 2 or 3 kids, can we send them down to the Discovery Weekend just to get them going there? And so, yeah, I'm excited about the possibilities.
That's awesome. I'd love to know when your weekend is.
If I can get your information, I think I will try to talk to you.
I will stick it in the chat.
Well, I'll do the same.
All right. Other questions?
Mike, I wonder if you would talk just a little bit about if a community that, say, had a couple of churches that wanted to do this together, how have you seen that work? A couple of churches coming together to do Discovery.
So the experience that I know the most about is these couple of, actually 3 small churches in the Upper New York Annual Conference, and a person who served on our advisory group last year, actually, who was just so excited about doing it, but could not see how they could do it. One of the reasons we want to separate the weekend guide out is because right now the manual is 180 pages-ish, and it is scary for people who look at it for the first time. And so we're working on a digital way to make that less scary and help those folks who look at it and say, well, we can never do this in our local church, to begin to grab a vision for possibly sharing it with several other churches. And that's what happened in this instance. And so the way they did that was to kind of take an inventory of what resources and what gifts each one of those churches could bring to it, and then divided the responsibilities that way for the event. And she has the most wonderful story that I've tried to get on video, and we haven't gotten it yet, but it's about a 70-something-year-old man who volunteered. And I don't think he had a specific role. He was just there for the whole weekend, and then continued to ask her when the next one would be, because he said, I will be there. That's such an important weekend. And again, research says that grandparent age people, it gives me hope because I might be moving into that age group. Grandparent age people are huge influences in the lives of young people. And so that opportunity to connect across generations is so important. And being able to do that even within smaller churches. We actually are also working on developing a digital version of the talks. They'll still be done by high schoolers. And we will work with churches to be able to do an online weekend for the talks, for music, worship time, and that sort of thing, but for them to be able to do their small groups locally, so that churches who just can't see a way that they're able to do that, at least at first, would have a way to be able to experience Discovery and then begin to imagine how they might do that in the future.
Are there other questions for Mike?
I want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you. I appreciate the invitation from Chelsea and Matthew. I have to say that that you have some pretty amazing people providing kind of the anchor leadership for this, and so I'm really excited for what's going to happen as Chrysalis moves into this next phase of life. I look forward to that. If you have other questions, I did put my email in the chat box. If you go to the Discovery Weekend Facebook page or into, and it's an N and a 2 and Discovery, trademarking is an interesting experience. You'll be able to see a lot more experience, and there's contact information there. There's also opportunities to donate. So if you feel led, feel free. But thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and let me know if there are other questions.
Yeah, Mike, I think we have one. I saw Barb from San Diego unmute there. Barb, do you have a question?
Yes, I was wondering, Mike, to start up, is it like with Chrysalis, we had people come from someplace else that had already experienced it. Is Discovery can be done without that kind of setup where we don't need to bring somebody that's already done this in?
Yes, that is very true. And so our goal is we have these 2 intro sessions that are coming up in the next several weeks online. And then the next step will be for us to do online training for people who are interested, so that we can kind of lay that groundwork. And then if you have other questions, if you have needs, we have leaders from Discovery churches who have volunteered to kind of be a guide or a mentor, or at least somebody that you can throw some questions at and be able to get some real life experience answers. So so it's not, as I said earlier, it's not as structured in many ways, but we do, I think, have the resources in order to help support you as you start that.
I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat about these upcoming Discovery sessions. Mike, it sounds like those sessions are open, right? They're video and...
They are open. They'll be on Facebook Live. And so if you just, again, if you go to the Facebook page, it has the information about each one of those events on there. And I would hope that you could be there. We will have years of Discovery experience. One of the leaders who will be with us experienced Discovery as a middle schooler and was the youth minister at the church where he is right now, and led Discovery, and is now, I think, the minister of discipleship, but serves on our board because it's so important to him.
We also are going to be getting together, Mike and I, sometime in the next soon. It has to be soon because these are coming up really quick. And we want to be able to get this message out to all of the communities, especially our trainers and consultants and communicators, and getting this information out. So we also will be meeting with our community support structure. So if you're in touch with your district communicator, they should have that information next week as well.
Yeah, and we'll make sure, we always try to do this, but any links that have been shared in the chat, any questions that have been shared in the chat will end up in that follow-up email that you will get from Matthew and myself next week. Also, these questions will be added to our ongoing Q&A page that we've been keeping a running, we've just been adding to. And part of my commitment to these 2 ministries is that if you and your community are discerning and are discerning Discovery and want to talk it through from more of a Chrysalis perspective, and I am your point of contact. And so now that manuals are to publishing and ready to go, my role on advisory team and helping to lead is really helping your communities embrace these materials, but also helping your communities to discern if the new updates to Chrysalis are the right way for your community to go, or if there are groups of churches that want to begin running Discovery Weekend as an additional option or a different option. And so I've shared a little bit about it, but I really have a heart for both Discovery and for Chrysalis in very different ways. And so I will be your point of contact from the Chrysalis Advisory Team if you want to have more conversations than tonight. But we'll make sure to share all of the Discovery contact info, and Mike and his team are also available. Are there other questions for Mike while we have him on screen? Yeah, Cindy, go ahead.
Well, oh, there we go. My question is, I'm assuming that it's just like Chrysalis and everything else, it's non-denominational, so any local church can use the material or plan a weekend.
Yes, we're predominantly United Methodist. We have several Episcopal churches that do Discovery Weekends. I understand we have a Baptist church in Kentucky that does the weekends. So, so we do have several other than United Methodist, and the materials are very upper room kind of experience. So there's Wesleyan theology for sure, but it's also not in any way specifically United Methodist.
All right, friends. Well, then I am going to pray us out. Before I do so, again, just want to remind you of our relaunch party extravaganza fun celebration on May 15th from 12 to 3 p.m. Central. I promise that there will be new content. If you have attended every one of these trainings, you will still learn something new. And if you have folks who have not attended a single training, they will not be completely lost. So there will be something for everybody on May 15th. And again, we're just grateful for your time. We're grateful that you continue to journey with us and to journey with us, right? To support us in prayer, to support your youth. I want to just remind you that Matthew and I continue to be available if you have more questions about Chrysalis relaunch. I know a lot of them have come in through the chat. If there are others, we will stick around after I pray, but I'm going to pray us out. And again, just thanks for being here. So let's pray. God, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for another night to gather and to celebrate this community. God, this community of young adult leaders, youth leaders, leaders in the Chrysalis and Emmaus communities. God, we are just trying to show up and to follow you better. We are trying to say yes to our call. We are trying to love you and your people more today than we did yesterday. And so, God, I give thanks for this community, for the ways that it has formed, even over Zoom, for the dedication in this space. God, I pray for each of these communities present and the youth and adults that they represent. I pray for the new beginnings, for challenging endings, and for the vision that you have given each of us. God, help us to live out that vision. Help us to continue to say yes to your call. God, I give you thanks for the Emmaus Ministry staff, for the ways that you continue to call them to this work, for their support of discovery and for Chrysalis weekends. God, thank you for who you are and for who you have called us to be. We love you and we praise you. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us, friends. Again, Matthew and I will stick around if you have more questions, but if not, have a good night.
Thank you.
Chelsea, I had a question. I finally got to watch the March YouTube, and with the Faithful Love Talk given by a variety of people, even a parent and a teenager. But if you have two friends do it, are you encouraging it to be two adult friends as opposed to their peer age friends?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it didn't come up on that March training. Yeah, I would say two adult friends or two maybe two young adults, I think would be fine. But the idea with that Faithful Love Talk is that there's still at least one adult present for it. So
Okay.
it could be college age, right? I know that often like college age individuals get in that weird category where it's, are you a youth? Are you an adult? I think college age would be fine for that talk, but no younger than that, at least for both participants.
That makes good sense. And are you still, I know it's been age 26 to be an adult table leader and to give adult talks. And we've had that strange age of, we call intermediates, where they can, serve them as a servant team and be on the back table, but they're too old to be a youth table leader, too young to be an adult table leader. And we've had those, strange age. Are you still encouraging adults to be 26? Or I know it's by case, but you don't really want an adult table leader at 22, I wouldn't think,
Yeah, Matthew, do you know what is in the community manual on that? Because it's not, or Doc, I know that it's not in the.
Doc knows if there's a specific number in the community manual.
Yeah, there really isn't one in the community manual that we talk about. It's really a community having to discern if that person is an adult or not. It may be something that your community decided to set those ages. But I'm even thinking through all the trainings that we have, and I don't know of anything that specifies that they have to be over a certain age to be an adult. I joke around all the time working in young adult ministries years ago that I personally know some 90-year-olds who aren't adults, and I know some 18-year-olds who aren't young. So, it's really it has to be a discernment process there by the community. So, y'all could revisit those ages and see how that works. So,
yeah,
I know in the regular Chrysalis manual that we've been using, it does specifically say 26 to do the adult talk. So that's what we've been sticking with.
do you happen to know what the publishing date of that manual is?
Mm-hmm. I think everything's been removed by now as far as being rigid about that. So we had an interesting situation in my home community. We had a youth. He and his girlfriend, they dated all the way through high school, and they got married the summer after they graduated from high school, and then went off to college. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, this kid's, he's a married man, so he shouldn't really be giving doing a youth talk, but he's not really old enough. So we had that one of those weird situations. So I think it's like Doc said, it's just some discernment with the communities based on maturity, based on where they are in life, where those students are in life. So
it's kind of hard when the lay director might have a friend that she is 23 and wants her as an adult table leader, but the team selection and the Chrysalis board really don't think that person's very mature. And so you're saying no, but the lay leader wants to. So if you have some kind of a guideline of an age, it helps to be able to say no.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's important to remember also that when you get into those situations, really the team selection is the one that has the final say so as to whether these persons are at the proper place to be able to do this. I understand lay directors want to bring their friends and these people into it, but there's a lot of times that it's team selection really has to step up and be willing to say, no, this is not the proper placement for this person yet.
Yeah.
So
I understand.
Yeah.
And I do have another question on the new materials. Will we need to purchase a set of new materials per flight that we want to host, or per community, or how is that? I know with the walks and the older ones, they were encouraging it to always be per walk.
the new ones still are too. And there's we understand that people can purchase their own digital copies of these directors manuals and team manuals if they want to do that. That is something that people can do. So they have one. The difficulty is now that we have these electronic and print on demand availabilities, we could change with a 2-week notice something in the manual. So the only way to really be sure you have the most up-to-date manual is to purchase new ones. The 3-day schedule and the position specific manuals are digital downloads, and they are to be purchased, one copy for each flight. And then you can print off as many of the 3-day schedules as you need for that flight. And the position specific manual is actually meant to be printed out and then taken apart and handed out to the different people that have those positions. So the director's manual and the team manuals are the only ones that really need to be looked at for purchase regularly, and multiple people needing them. So, and again, if an individual wants to go buy theirs, I think they're $12 and $18, something like that. So they're not expensive. So, and if you want to see, I can send you a thing that we did, a PDF that explains how the manuals really need to be used. If you'd like one of those, let me put this in the chat. My email address is hhall@upperroom.org. I'll be happy to send that to you.
Thank you.
It describes it much better than I can tonight, being half awake and COVID brain. So.
Any other questions?
Well, while I'm on a roll,
Yeah.
is there used to at the other one, we had either a tripod or a 3-legged stool to represent the prayer and the growth through study and action. I got from watching that 3rd day about talks that it was more based on the Good Samaritan story. Or are we still needing a tripod or a 3-legged stool thing to represent?
Yeah, that option is still there. If that is a part of your community, that is a tradition that's really important. There's still space for it in the Christian Action Talk. And it would still fit in with the talk on the beginning of day 2 that has combined with study and prayer. So it could be introduced in that talk and then followed up with Christian Action.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering.
The Good Samaritan talk is a separate talk, a new talk. that follows that morning talk. Any other questions, anyone, on anything?
On anything Chrysalis.
Right.
This can't become pop quiz on anything, or we might fail.
Stump the guy from the office.
Yeah.
So if other people aren't chiming in, I noticed in your chat, you said there was no board report template, and that if you currently have one, you could probably still use that. Oh, should we just kind of edit it for the new, you know,
Doc,
only 14 talks and
is
so
there
forth?
such thing as a board report template?
We have one for the walk that we did that is up to date, and we can share that with communities as well. It's basically the really abbreviated outlines with checklists, and then the different things that are supposed to be in order. I'm sure we'll do one for Chrysalis once we get the new materials in our hands, and can send that out to you up to date one. So just let us know. You know, a lot of communities make up their own because the minute by minute schedule, a lot of times that's a community thing, because they're also talking about go make sure that the meal's ready and go turn the temperature down in the chapel, and, you know, all of those things. And communities really need to come up with theirs, because each community has different. But there is the 3-day schedule that is the basis that your minute by minute schedule should be made out to. So
Thank
that
you.
makes sense.
Yes, that made very good sense.
Good. Yeah, my home community has a 175-page Excel document that is minute by minute. And I quit using that years ago. I went back to the upper room schedule.
Anything else, friends? Other questions?
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. Want to remind you, we'll send a follow-up email in the next week or so. It'll be really in the next week, because we want to make sure you get the May 15th registration. But again, thanks for joining us tonight. You all know how to reach Matthew and myself, and now Doc. So feel free to ask questions when you have them.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.